Hey, work from homers, Adam Schrader here. We love bringing you this podcast, and thousands of you have proven that it's been helpful for you. But since time and online storage space aren't free, Naresh and I wanted to come to you personally to ask for your financial support through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/workfromhomeshow and help support the show. And we appreciate your support at any amount you choose. That's patreon.com/workfromhomeshow. Thanks for your support. Let's get to the show.
Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Work From Home Show. Shout out to all our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. I'm Naresh Fissa with Adam Schrader. Today we have Barbara Mitchell on the show. She's a managing partner of the Mitchell Group, which is a human resources and organizational development consulting practice. She is a #1 best-selling author, co-author, I should say, of the Essential HR Handbook, which now has a 10th anniversary edition. It's a quick and handy resource for any manager or HR professional. And the new book, The Big Book of HR, which is also in the 10th anniversary edition. That's the newer version. So without further ado, Barbara Mitchell, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Thank you. I love the idea of your show and look forward to hearing more about what you all do.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit, as you've been going around doing HR and as people have now moved to, some virtual, some physical, and that mix, how do you manage your company's human resources when people aren't in the office? Is it easier? Is it harder? Because, workplace sexual harassment, I would think, would be down, but, maybe you have more issues with performance or evaluating the performance in some way. So can you tell us a little bit about how the work from the virtual or remote working has changed the current situation?
Sure. It's a wonderful topic, and I just have to tell you that I have been in favor of flexibility in the workplace for years, and I am actually quite excited. I'm not happy about the pandemic, but excited that now we have really adapted the hybrid and many other kinds of ways to work together. But I can't tell you that it's simplified people working together. There are always going to be issues. Is it easier? In some respects, you mentioned harassment and some other things that probably have gone down. But now it's HR folks and managers are really working hard to try and keep people in some way or another connected to each other. And I think that's where the main focus is right now, how to do that, how to make it happen, and how to make it effective so that your organization is as productive as possible.
When I was going through your books, you had one that really stuck out to me because it's something that I don't think a whole lot of people really spend time looking into. And that's your conflict resolution phrase book, which, conflict resolution and conflict avoidance are huge things. That can make the environment of a workplace so much better. So can you tell us a little bit about some ways that people can change just the way that they say things in order to avoid conflict?
Most importantly is to put yourself in the shoes of the other person. And secondly, I could go back and forth as to which is more important here, but to listen to each other. If people listen to each other and really connect on a level where they are understanding each other, conflict can diminish quite rapidly. And the phrase book that you mentioned is sort of a fun book. We have 2 chapters at the back. One is what you can always say, phrases you can always say in order to encourage people to work together well. And then there's probably my favorite chapter is you can never say this. And we had some fun putting together some things that you would never want to say in the workplace or anywhere else for that matter. Probably save a few marriages too. But working together is just the most important thing of all is to just connect with each other and be thinking about not just myself, but I think, again, listening is so important. And then some empathy. Boy, can that go a long way in resolving conflict situations.
So can you tell us some phrases that people think are helpful whenever they're dealing with the situation that in reality are in no way, shape, or form helpful?
Well, I think when people say things like, why did you do that? Or putting a phrase that can be just by its nature of the words, just negative and shuts down conversation. What you want is to be able to use words that are open-ended and not ever say where they can answer yes or no. You want to give a question where if you're questioning why someone did something, you want to make it so they can give you a really good answer and use some good words to let you understand then, oh, that's where you were headed with that. I thought it was X and you're going to Y. So communication is such an unbelievably valuable part of how we work together. So asking questions that are good, putting yourself in the person's shoes, and also not getting involved in things that really are not any of your business. Boy, do a lot of conflicts happen in the workplace where people think that they should have a voice in somebody else's conflict. Probably not. So we really try and put some words to it. We don't think that people carry the handbook or phrase book around with them, and when they get into a difficult situation, pull it out and say, just a minute, I got to look up a phrase. It's the kind of thing that hopefully you have a few of the phrases in your back pocket that work for you. And we've got over 2,000 in that book, so chances are there's something that you might use that works.
Seems pretty likely. Whenever it comes to your new book, The Big Book of HR, the 10th anniversary edition, people on the whole don't change that quickly. So what has changed in the workplace and with people that requires kind of the update needed to come out? Because obviously things have changed,
Sure.
or else you wouldn't be coming up with an update. So
right.
What's changed?
We actually did an update 5 years ago as well, because enough changes. There's always new laws that affect the workplace, and we have to address those. There are new ways of approaching situations, and of course in this one, we signed the contract in February of 2020, and then of course we all know what happened in March of 2020. The workplace changed dramatically, and we had to write the book, update the book in time of COVID, which was complicated because we didn't want to make it a COVID-centric book. We wanted to be evergreen, but so many things have changed. So we added some chapters, one on flexibility. We didn't ever have that before. And just technology, of course, is always changing and always impacting HR and the workplace. So we have a new chapter in the updated book on harassment. And then just everything. So many things just got touched. We didn't have a whole lot of laws that happened in the last couple of years, but we did have a lot of changes in how people work together and the use of just how do we collaborate. Things like that just did not have a place 5 years ago. We weren't talking, yes, we certainly needed to collaborate, but we weren't using technology to do it, perhaps. So believe me, we found enough, because in order to do an update in the Library of Congress rules, you have to have at least 30% new content.
And so when you look at if you're a business owner, because a lot of our listeners have businesses of some sort, and they have, as they get big enough, or if they are big enough to actually need an HR person, what should you look for in your HR, in your HR position, the director of HR? What should you actually be looking for, and how do you judge them based on their performance? Like, what are some of the things you should be looking at as an owner to see if your HR is actually functioning like they should?
I would want to look at how they would respond to certain questions, and only the owner could tell. Maybe give them a couple of scenarios of how would you handle this, and actually give them something that had happened previously, and see if it fits the way you would do it or that you would want it done. Because as a business owner, you're the frontline person, and your HR person has to represent you. So I'd want to make sure that that person had strong credentials. So many times what happens in HR, and I hate to even say this, but I will, somebody says, oh, let's make Susie the HR person because she likes people. Well, that's probably the worst reason ever to make somebody into human resources. Because after you've been in HR for a while, you may not like people at all because people are
people are the worst.
A little trouble. Yeah, there you go. So it's not that you like people, it's that you're able to work with people. If you're able to, again, I go back to my favorite word of the year here, listen. If you're able to make good decisions based on the background that you've had, I would want the person to have had some background in HR where they know the laws, they know things that you absolutely positively have to pay attention to, and then someone that you as the owner feel comfortable in working with. Frequently, the HR person becomes the coach for the owner or the top person in the organization because they can be trustworthy and they've got a good instincts about working with people.
Barbara, I'm a HR director of my household. I manage all the benefits. I manage the house. I hire all the people to run the house, including taking care of the kids. And I married into a really, really big family. So I'm constantly managing all sorts of people who I didn't sign up to manage. Well, I should say I did sign up to manage, but just didn't have much information, let's put it that way, about how
Right.
big this family is. But anyway, I don't have really any experience in HR. I do have corporate experience. I've worked with HR professionals while working in corporate. And I want to stress to our listeners that Barbara is one of the world's leading gurus when it comes to human resources and organizational development. Her books, if you look them up on Amazon, I think one of them may even be a New York Times bestseller, if not a number one. I know both books hit number one on Amazon, even more than two of your books have hit number one on Amazon. But they have sold extremely. My guess is your books, I should say, many companies, corporations worldwide are buying them in bulk and making their HR teams, maybe even their employees, read it as full-time, as required reading.
Well, it's a wonderful idea, and I wish that more people did that. But yes, we are thrilled at the reception that our books have gotten, and we're always looking for new ideas. We're working on a new book right now, which is a question and answer book with questions on how to deal with people, just ordinary kinds of things that come up on a daily basis, how to answer them. And those are fun for us to write because we can use all of our expertise from the years that both my co-author and I have spent in the human resources trenches, can I say?
Yeah, and I'll also mention that when I was working in corporate, now we're small business owners, and we'll get into that space shortly. But when I was in corporate, I wondered at the time, this was over a decade ago, I was thinking, why is there even an HR function? Why don't they just outsource it to a company like yours, like a chief HR officer type of company that would just come in and do the HR for you, and you don't have to hire and recruit and do all this stuff in-house. And then I even thought managing people, I was like, people are people. They don't like to be managed. I mean, just look at what we're seeing politically. I mean, you got half the world which does not want to be told what to do, does not want to be managed. And I will say this, managing people and knowing how to deal with people is, I think, a top 2 skill that you can have. And most people don't know that's a skill, and they don't try to improve that skill. But it is so important. You brought up, keeping a marriage together, for example, having children and your children growing up. It's not just about business. And look, in business, I deal with at least 50 different people every single day. Whether it's my real estate properties, web work that we're working on, podcasting work that we're working on, PR initiatives, you name it, at least 50 people a day. And I would say 29 out of 30 days, smooth sailing. People are nice, not too many problems. There might be that one day a month where I have to strategize and figure out, okay, how am I going to deal with this person? Not even this situation, but this person. And this is just in the workplace. Now we talk about household, completely different scenario. But learning how to deal with people and managing people is a very important skill. And there's a reason why corporations and even mid-sized companies hire people who specialize in this skill set.
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate the fact that you get how important people are. I say something all the time that I hope it makes sense, but there's nothing more important than having the right people in an organization. Doesn't matter how great your service is, how great your product is. If you don't have the right people who can produce it, deliver it, whatever their role is, it doesn't matter how great the rest of your work is. You're not going to be successful. And if people think about that when they hire and bring people into an organization and onboard them and work on the building up their culture and all of the things that can make for just superb organizations, then you don't have those days when you've got that person that you just absolutely can't deal with because they're just not in the right place. If you've got the right people and you've trained them and you're engaging them in the work, I know I sound like a bit of a Pollyanna here, but I do think that it can be done. And when it's done and done right, your organization will be incredibly successful.
I want to talk, I mentioned small businesses. I run a small business. Adam runs a small business. And at what stage of your business, or let's say the growth, at what stage in growth is it time to take HR seriously? Because I can tell you, my business is so small that it's just not economically feasible to even consider that.
Absolutely does. And I think if we think of it a little bit differently, that you don't think of it as an HR function, but think about that you're paying attention to your people. You would do that even if you're a number 2 person that you have in your organization, all the way up to the top of whatever the number is. It's not the function of human resources. It's how do you manage the people. And at the beginning of the growth cycle for your organization, it's you managing the people. And so that's why I think our books can be pretty important, because it can help a small business owner think about what's the best way to bring a new person into my culture? How do I even know how to describe my culture? And every organization has a culture, whether they think of it or not. But if you ask about at what point do you need to have someone who is managing the human resources, usually organizations do it around 50, because so many laws kick in at 50 employees. That's a kind of a good rule of thumb, that you might want to either have you can outsource it. You mentioned that earlier at that point, and have someone monitoring your processes, having a handbook, putting policies and procedures together, just sort of systemizing things. 50 is kind of a good number. Can you do it before then? Sure. You're just that much more organized. But the bigger you get, it's important to have just the right person in the function of managing your people, not someone who's going to try and make you into a humongous company before your growth is taking you in that direction. Although I'm sure every small business hopes to grow to a certain size, but you want it as the owner, as the manager of the business, you want to control that. And so you'd want to have the right personality that you're working with, whether it's a consultant or whether it's someone you hire to help you with the people part of your business. I like the word people rather than human resources now. I think it really, it's what we're talking about, the people in the organization.
We had a client who had a small business. Nobody was full-time, so it was a bunch of independent contractors. So this CEO or this founder didn't make HR a priority because he said, oh, everyone's an independent contractor, so I don't need to worry about HR or workplace culture or any of that stuff. And he must have had at least 10 independent contractors. And boy, I tell you, every year there was at least 70% of his contractors firing him as a client or leaving because
that says it all.
Yeah, because he didn't take it seriously, and he basically became the HR. He became the culture, and it became almost, even though it was a digital company, everything was remote. Everybody worked from home. He created like this digital hostile work environment. It was interesting to be a part of it.
I bet, and not in a good way.
Yep, not in a good way by any means. So in your latest book, you talk about a lot of new topics, which we've touched on today. One of those topics is social media, and you claim that companies can do a better job of integrating social media with recruitment and with people recruitment. Since you don't like calling it HR, we'll call it people recruitment. So and the functions associated with it. So tell us a little bit more how companies can better use social media.
Well, first thing I would always recommend is making sure that your website is as great as it can be, because many organizations now are using their websites to attract and retain people. And so therefore, you've got to make sure that everything, your culture looks good on your website. You describe the jobs that are open. You talk about how much fun you have in your, whatever it is that you want the world to know about you. And that's a great place to get started. And then using social media, certainly, there are organizations that are using Twitter very effectively now. One thing that social media can do, we're having such a crisis now with people interviewing and then getting ghosted on both sides, not getting follow-up after they have an interview, not hearing from the company. Successful companies now are using text and other forms of technology to keep in touch with people that they interview and they want to keep in touch with, so that when the right job comes open, they're ready to make an offer to them. And so it's just being aware of all of the options that are out there. We think LinkedIn, of course, is the best business way of keeping in touch with people and putting jobs out there and attracting talent to your organization. It depends on, of course, what your business is. LinkedIn, of course, is primarily for businesses, not for anything social in social media, but LinkedIn is definitely a social media vehicle.
Yeah.
But when go ahead.
Well, I was going to share a story. I'll let you finish, and I'll share a story about a recruitment cycle that I went through and how social media, LinkedIn, website, everything that you talked about was critical in me not taking the job. But I'll explain why I ended up taking the job, but I'll let you finish what you were saying.
No, what I was going to say is making sure that anything you do on social media is works on digital media. So many organizations have very complicated application processes. that don't translate to a cell phone, for example. You can't read what their application is. People are not going to apply if it's too complicated for them to do it. So everything if you're using social media to recruit, you need to make sure that you scale everything so that it is, there's a great organization called Engaged by Cell, and they do really good work about recruitment using digital products like your cell phone. So I just want to put that in as a little idea that make sure that your things look good on a small screen as well as a large.
Yeah, and I'll share.
Yeah, tell me your
quick.
story.
Yeah, so the big companies, the corporations, they definitely do HR properly, and they put a lot of, they have the money to put into HR and people relations and recruitment and all that. So actually, I went to graduate school, one of the top business schools in the country, was recruited by several well-known companies that you've heard of, that our listeners have heard of, got job offers, and always thought, okay, I'm going to be this corporate guy, because when you go to a top institution, if you go get an MBA from, a top 20 university, top 10 university, that's just expected. That's just the career path that you're going to take. And so I was all set to do that. And then this company found me on LinkedIn. It was a small business at the time. We'll call it a medium-sized business. And I hadn't really heard of them before. So they randomly sent me an email. How did they send me an email? They put in a few keywords into LinkedIn. And this was when LinkedIn was a small platform. It's not what it is today. This is when it was easy to connect with someone on LinkedIn, like with an Apple executive, and to get a meeting with them, or a Wall Street executive, and to meet up for coffee. Like I used to do this all the time. Like I went to school when LinkedIn was of actual huge benefit to a student like me. I would take trips into New York City and meet with 10 different Wall Street executives in one day. And these were managing directors, grabbing coffee, grabbing lunch. And it was all through LinkedIn. You're not going to be able to do that today, because the number of users on it are just out of this world, and people are so tired of the spam. But it was not like that in 2008, 2009, 2010. And so anyway, this company, they just put in a few keywords into LinkedIn, and I was one of two people who popped up when they plugged in these keywords, because they were looking to recruit to fill a position for a brand new division that they wanted to start. And they found me on LinkedIn, and then they Googled me, because they read my LinkedIn. They said, okay, it's pretty interesting. It's pretty cool. Let's Google him. So they Googled me, and I had a website. Thankfully, Adam created my website maybe a year before. Not even a year before, maybe 3 or 4 months beforehand. So they found my website, and they were able to find out more about me and my resume, my clips, my projects that I've worked on in the past, and then how to contact me. So they emailed me and they said, hey, we found you on LinkedIn. We went through your website. We looked at your stuff. We're ready to hire you. Can you hop on the phone today? And I was like, oh, wow, I just skipped. I remember, these big Wall Street banks taking 2 months to recruit me and hire me. So they're ready to hire. And so I get on the phone with them later that afternoon, and they immediately gave me a contract and said, we want to hire you, immediately. I said, let's start out with a contract. So they immediately gave me a contract. And many, many months later, after, let's say 7 months maybe, they reached out again and said, hey, we know you're under contract and you're working from home and you're doing all this stuff, but we need you in our offices. We want you full time, and we're going to go ahead and book your flight. So they copied their secretary or whoever it was, their office manager, and she immediately responded to the email and said, I know you live in this city, and we need you to come on this day. So they already had the day figured out, And she said, here are the 2 flights that are available on that day. Which one works better for you? So they basically were like, this guy's not saying no to us. We're just going to go ahead and book his flights, book his hotels, whatever, to get me on that plane, to get me in their offices. And I was flattered. I was like, wow, they're doing a great job. But now on my side, here I am being recruited by these well-known household companies. And I had never heard of this company, or I knew very little about it. I go online. There wasn't the website looked like it was built in like 1998. It was super old. It looks like a kid made it on Microsoft Word. They had reviews online that were horrible. I mean, because it was a company that sold products, almost like a infomercial type of company. So you had a lot of people who were like, the product stinks, it's a scam, and they had terrible reviews online. And there was no way to contact, like, they didn't have any social media. There was no Twitter, Facebook, you name it, YouTube, nothing. And this was kind of an inflection point when most companies at least had that bare minimum. They had a good website that looked real, and they had some kind of Facebook and LinkedIn, or not LinkedIn, Twitter. And they didn't have anything. And I was just kind of like, this is really, really strange. Like, I'm actually kind of scared. On top of that, they're based in Baltimore, which is a very scary city. I'd never been, but I'd heard bad things about it. So here I am. I get this was before Uber. They book my flight. They say, well, pay for your cab to and from the airport. They pick me up in a limo from BWI Airport, Baltimore Washington International Airport, take me to their office. Their offices looked like an abandoned warehouse. I was like, where am I going? What is going on here? And I was set in my mind, hey, I'm going to give them a chance, but I'm not turning down, the big company with the real HR department. Like, I'll just do this for the experience. And lo and behold, it was a real company with real people. They gave me a real offer. They told me why they branded themselves that way. There was a reason behind branding themselves that way. Because I told them, look, it's shady. Like, everything's shady about everything. Like, you guys are not my top choice. I'm not flattered. And then they gave me the offer and the bonus and all these other things, and that was flattering enough for me to be like, I should actually take this company seriously now. And so about 2 weeks later, I didn't give them an answer, and again they said, look, we want you to meet our founder this time, because previously I met with their directors and their like number 2 guy. They said, our number 1 guy, our founder, he's going to be in the office on this date, and we're going to go, same thing, we're going to book your hotel, book your flight, and all this stuff, pick you up in the limo, take you to lunch, drinks, the whole deal. So I said, all right, let's go ahead and do it. I had a lunch with the founder, and basically he sold me on everything. And looking back at it, it was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life, not to go that corporate route. But the point I want to make here is even though they told me the reason for why they didn't have the social media, why they didn't take their website seriously, it definitely hurt them. I think they could have attracted way more talent, way better talent. People would take them more seriously if they invested into that. Now today, this is now over a decade later, they've done that. But back then, there's no doubt in my mind that they missed out on the best of the best talent. And they were wondering, how come nobody wants to work for us? We're willing to pay above what, Wall Street or Silicon Valley at the time, above what they're going to pay. And it's simple things like what you just said, like the social media, like the website, very simple things that can make a huge difference.
Wow, that is a stunning story. I'd love to sometime hear what their reason was for doing that 10 years ago or whenever it was. But you're absolutely right. I'm surprised that you got as far as you did. I can see a lot of people just saying, ooh, this doesn't feel right. And it
That's
does
what I
have to feel right when you're making a decision that affects your life, your family's life, all kinds of things. So yeah, those social media, well, it can be annoying on many levels. It can also be wonderful certainly for information sharing, and right now I think it's so important for networking purposes, since we're not most of us aren't going to events and other ways of meeting people. Social media networking is just such a key. The people that you meet on that you can connect with on LinkedIn, and I know it's very different from what it was at the beginning, but it's still very effective, and ways to learn about people and ways to be able to make good decisions as to what direction do you want your career to go.
Yeah, and I want to switch topics from social media, wrap things up by talking about a topic that has it's really come to the forefront over the past, I would say, 3-4 years. It was somewhat scratching the surface when I used to work for companies, but now it's almost all you hear. And my friends who still work in corporate, they talk about it because, quite frankly, they don't agree with it and they don't really like it. And that is diversity. Companies are making diversity a priority. Do you talk about this in your latest book, and how can companies make diversity a priority without losing out on top talent?
Well, first of all, yes, we do. We have a whole chapter on. I'm very, very much in favor of it for one reason, and I'm going to say one reason only, and that is how people define diversity.
Yes.
Diversity is not just race, gender. We're talking about what really matters is having different perspectives, different attitudes, different backgrounds, different nationalities, and all kinds of things. The differences that diversity brings to an organization. And I think organizations that are not focusing on wanting to have a diverse workforce are making a big mistake long term, because it is going to make a huge difference with the diversity of thought, with our global economy, all of the things that we need to be able to work together with people from all over the world, all different perspectives. So it can't be a narrow definition of in organizations that make it a narrow definition. I can see why your friends are not liking it, but I think they better get on board, because I don't think it's going to go away.
Well, when you define it that way, they will absolutely be on board, because you did not say diversity is filling a position with a black woman. So if you're hiring for a role and you say, okay, we need to bring in an IT director, and I want or an IT analyst or whatever, and I'm only going to hire a black woman to fill this position, it can, what you're doing is you're boxing yourself in to.
Certainly, yes. Oh, I agree. Yeah.
And
that's not what I'm talking about.
So that's not. So it's important to make that distinction, because it appears that a lot of corporations are going that route and saying, we need to go out and find more LGBTQ employees, or we need to go out and fill this department with more people from this ethnicity. And I should say, the people who I brought up, these are people of color. The people who I brought up who don't like this diversity initiative, it's people of color. And the reason why they don't like the initiatives that their corporations are undertaking is because it affects their jobs and their job functions. So when they want to bring in their own people who don't fit that box, but the people can get the job done and make their jobs easier, everyone's happy. But what's happening is the company has come in and said, you must find this, this type of or they're not. It's illegal to discriminate, as you know, it's illegal to discriminate based on race. But the fact of the matter is, decisions are still being made, and they're covering it up with some other excuse. Just like a family member told me he didn't hire a pregnant woman. because he didn't want her to take off, basically hire her and then have her take off for a long time and be paying her. But he just came up with some other excuse, saying, "Oh, we found another better candidate." It's always easy to find an excuse like that, and so that's what's been happening, where really qualified people who can get the job done, it's like second nature to them. They have master's degrees from reputable schools, are being passed up for other people who aren't as qualified, who need the training, who can't hit the ground running, and they're slowing the team down. And I think that's a problem when it comes to diversity.
Well, we could talk about that for the rest of the year and probably have different perspectives on it. But I certainly hear what you're saying, and I don't think that if people really understand what DEI, diversity and inclusion is all about, people are not looking for filling boxes or checking boxes off. It is my theory on this is that you want to cast a wide net for all kinds of people for your organization, and not go back to the same school that you always go to, or always look for the same people that come from the same agency, but that you look and give people a chance. And that's all that I believe that's what we're talking about when we talk about diversity. And it's going to pay off for organizations if they really do it and do it right.
Yeah, I do agree. I'm a person of color, and I've been in situations where I said, look, I'm a fan of diversity, because if you're hiring good people from different backgrounds, different experiences, who can get the job done, that is
Right.
just the best. It is absolutely the best. And
Yep.
if there are, because I know that if there are organizations, look, like I said, I've been a part of the Good Old Boys Network. I've worked in corporate. I've worked at medium-sized businesses, worked with clients, and there are these good old boy networks. And these good old boy networks don't pay any attention to diversity. It's all about who they golf with at the country club, or
Mm-hmm.
who they're going to be sharing the table with at the club this weekend. And fact of the matter is, from a business perspective, not the greatest decisions are being made at the club or the golf course. They're not.
That's
And
right.
that's where I say the diversity initiative makes sense, to cast open a wide, like you said, a wide range of people, and not just hiring your friend from the country club, or not just hiring your sister-in-law or your brother. When I was working, it would irritate me when I would see the cronyism, the nepotism for people who had no qualification whatsoever, yet they still got this high prestigious job because of who their uncle was. Look, I understand, Daddy. That's a little different. Adam's got 4 boys. I get, especially if it's a family business, I can get that a little bit more, and you know what you're walking into as an employee when you're walking into that family-run business. But when we're talking about medium-sized businesses, large businesses, and decisions are being made, like I said, at the country club, it's not just a question of fairness, but you're hurting yourself at the end of the day. And by casting that wide net and diversifying your workforce, it's going to be a much better place to work. People are going to be, you brought up inclusivity. They're going to feel, most of that company that comes to mind, everyone felt like an outsider because they weren't a part of that country club. And you had the 10 or 15 guys who would go on their hunting trips, who would, go golf at the country club. And everyone else just felt like, oh, I'm not a part of this club, and I'm just earning a paycheck, and I don't feel like I belong here.
And think about that poor woman that you mentioned who didn't get hired because she was pregnant. Could have been the best hire they ever made, and they missed out on that.
She was their top choice. She absolutely was their top choice, and they ended up not hiring her solely because of that.
Yeah.
So, and this was a long time. This must have been, now today, I would think that things would be very different today. This happened, I want to say, in the 80s. So it was a very different time.
Okay.
And Speaking of a
Yes,
good old
yeah.
boys network, this was in the oil and gas industry in Texas. So
Oh, yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. There are certainly industries that are like that. Well, look just things like what the NFL is going through now. You just where the coach that got fired is suing the NFL.
oh yeah, the Miami
There's
Dolphins
just
coach, I think.
right, who's now a Pittsburgh Steelers assistant coach. He got a job, but it's just very interesting how these things pop up and how decisions are made. But if they're made for the right reasons, for the growth of the organization, I think that it starts with that casting the wide net idea of making sure that your candidate pool has a variety of people with a variety of skills, because you can bet that your customers are diverse.
Yeah, and you and I think we are in agreement on this. I think that we just come from it slightly differently.
Mm-hmm.
I come from it from pure business perspective. As a business owner, I want to be profitable. I want to be a leader. And so this is just backed by the data. It's backed by, if you want to call it the science, by the research. It's a smart thing to do. Whereas I think socially, or I should say, many corporations are doing it from a social perspective of, oh, this is just something that we have to do, politically, or to appease certain folks. Or I'm not saying you come from that perspective, but I'm just saying many of these companies are doing it for almost because they're pressured to do it, and not because they
not for the right reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
So
we'll keep trying. we'll keep
trying.
on it.
Look, it's progress. It's progress. The way things are today,
That's right.
way better than they were when I was working 10 years ago.
Right.
And I expect, despite the social war that this world is in, things have gotten better, a lot better. And I think 10 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, wow, things have gotten better again. And we are, as a world, making progress. And certainly the country is making progress. And so I'm not complaining. I'm certainly not complaining about any of that. So Barbara Mitchell, managing partner of the Mitchell Group, thank you so much for joining us on the Work From Home Show. Get her books on Amazon, the Essential HR Handbook, as well as the Big Book of HR. And the website is bigbookofhr.com. That's bigbookofhr.com. Barbara, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners, or anything else you want to promote?
I just wanted to share that on our website, we do a weekly blog, and we do a monthly newsletter. Lots of free information for a small business that you could, if you want to check out our website, even if you don't want to buy our books, which of course I hope you do want to buy at least one of them. But the website has lots of free stuff that you can pick up and hopefully benefit from.
That sounds good. Barbara Mitchell, thank you so much once again for joining us on the Work From Home Show. To all our listeners, check us out at workfromhomeshow.com. That's www.workfromhomeshow.com. You can follow us on social media. I already plugged the website. Those are what we talked about, social media and website. You can contact us through there too. We got a contact form. You can get on our mailing list. They would keep in touch with us through that mailing list. We always send out free goodies through that mailing list, including blog posts, including other opportunities, that contract or job opportunities we might have. And if you listen to us through your podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever you use, please, we greatly appreciate your leaving us a review. And until next week, keep on working from home.